Two-year-old boy who vanishes at a remote Idaho campsite. His parents are convinced their toddler boy has been kidnapped. The searching for Deorr Kunz continues at this hour. The family is standing by, vowing to not leave until they find their son. But who was the last person to see the little boy before he disappears? Tonight, we uncover who else was at that Timber Creek campground the day Deorr goes missing without a trace.
This is the campsite where Deorr and his family were camping. The creek is just here, a few yards away.
We decided we're going to go a little exploring.
They went up this way, away from the campsite.
He was going to be good with Grandpa by the campfire.
By the time the parents came back,
we weren't more than probably 50 yards away in 10 minutes.
Deorr was gone.
And another search continues tonight in a shocking discovery near a New Haven train station. Human legs found hidden in the bushes. A few blocks away, another stunning discovery, human arms dumped in a plastic bag. Are they even related? Authorities are trying to ID right now the victim or victims.
Rotting smell.
Nasty whiff, a plastic bag with something awful inside.
Found what appears to be a human arm.
Just 8 hours earlier, police discovered 2 human legs in a wooded area near the State Street train station.
And a Connecticut couple rushed their tiny newborn to the ER with a severe swollen leg. The infant is just a few weeks old. By the time the doctors finish examining the baby, they uncover 20 fractures all over the baby's body. The mother and father, they allegedly say they have no idea how that happened. But when law enforcement asked for answers, they reportedly lawyer up, refusing to talk to police. Good evening. I'm Jean Casares in for Nancy Grace. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin tonight in the bizarre case of a 2-year-old boy who mysteriously vanishes at an Idaho campground. Let's go straight out to the reporter Nate Eaton with East Idaho News. Nate, you've been right out there where the search is happening. What are you hearing about who else was at the campsite when 2-year-old Deorr disappears?
Well, we know that Deorr's parents were there, along with his great-grandfather and a friend of the great-grandfather. At this point, we don't know much about that friend. Police aren't saying much, but they are telling us that at this point, they believe the parents are clear that they did nothing wrong and that they just want their son back.
All right, I think we want to show everybody right out there. Nate, you were out there, and we want to show exactly to everybody what that area is like, where they were, where this little boy went missing, and where they're searching. Watch this.
This is the campsite where Deorr and his family were camping. It looks like your average campsite. You've got a fire pit, a picnic table, very close to the creek that we have heard so much about. In fact, the creek is just here, a few yards away. Notice the terrain down to the water. It's very steep. It would be difficult for a young child to make their way down that hill. It is possible, but again, it is a steep hill. Now, we're told that the parents and all of the family were here together when the parents decided to go off exploring. They went up this way, away from the campsite, while Deorr stayed here with his grandfather. By the time the parents came back, about 10 or 15 minutes later, Deorr was gone.
Now, it's very interesting what you're showing us, what you're telling us, and there is water there, and I've asked some questions. So I understand there is a creek that goes into the reservoir which is also called a lake, and they are continuing to search down there in the water area. What's happening right now?
They are. They're there as we speak. They've been there several times. We've been told that search and rescue crews have gone through that creek on their hands and knees, combing every inch of that creek, but they've really been focusing on the reservoir. In fact, we're hearing that some of the dogs, the search dogs, may have picked up a scent. Not sure what that scent is, but it seems that the focus today and the past few days has been that reservoir.
But the fact is, they aren't finding him. They're not finding anything about him, any articles of clothing or his cowboy boots or anything at all. So the dogs are hitting on the water, but they're not finding anything. So to Cheryl Dorsey, she's a retired sergeant with the Los Angeles Police Department in Los Angeles. What are your thoughts at this point? Because they're continuing to search in that area. The parents believe this child was kidnapped out of that camping area by someone who is unknown at this point and could be anywhere in Idaho or in the country at this point. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, not knowing a lot about the area and the number of people that were also visiting that campsite would make me wonder why the parents would think someone else would have the child. And it's possible that the child may not have been able to negotiate that steep path down to the river, but could have fallen. So there's so many possibilities and locations where this child could be. It's very troubling. And the fact that the parents didn't ensure that someone was watching the little boy when they walked away to investigate the area is problematic for me.
Dr. Bill Mannion, forensic pathologist, joining us from Philadelphia. We saw the terrain right there. For a little boy like that, 2.5 years old, he would fall down. But if he would fall down, he would probably get scraped and there would be blood. And they have had dogs out there for days now. They have not picked up that scent of blood, as far as we know. What does that tell you? It adds more to the mystery here.
Exactly. Maybe the child didn't fall down that way. The other thing, are there wild animals in the area? Could the child have been grabbed by an animal and carried off or carried into the water? The child can only survive for a couple days without food and maybe 4 or 5 days without water. So time is running out.
Matt Zorell, we do know that the family has been asked for their DNA. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the cops say that NCMA, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they want their DNA samples on file because, as we're talking about, if this was an abduction and if the child is found somewhere else in the country, they would like to have the DNA on file so they could easily check to see if there's a match. We don't know yet if the parents have officially given their DNA, but there's no indication that would be any issue. They're cooperating 100%.
And that's something we want to make sure everybody realizes. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they are down there at the search site now. This is the national organization that you hear about that is so responsible for having missing children become united back with their parents again. Matt Zorell, one more thing. Lie detector tests, polygraphs, have any of them been done at all with family members?
No, but the cops are telling us on the record that the parents have volunteered to take polygraphs, but the sheriff doubts that they would even be administered at this time. Gene, they're really focusing on the scene. They want to make sure that the child is not there before they move on to other possibilities.
And also the family, they are staying right there. They are camping. You know, they're from Idaho Falls, Idaho. They're not going home. They're staying right there in a tent, right where they're searching for their son, and they vow that they're not leaving until that son is found. To Wendy Patrick, a prosecutor in Los Angeles, this is a missing persons case, but they are obviously searching everywhere. They're leaving all options open. If a crime has been committed, this is U.S. forestry land where this is right here. So that would be a federal jurisdiction, right?
Well, probably so, Gene. And, you know, one of the interesting things that you brought up about this case is that in a CSI world of forensic evidence, it's hard to go missing without a trace. There's not so much as a sock, not a blood stain, not hair, I mean, nothing, which makes it to some people look like an abduction. So whatever jurisdiction ends up, and it may actually be several jurisdictions that end up doing this investigation, it's going to really look like an abduction until and unless they can find some circumstantial evidence that it was a natural death. In other words, they're leaving every option on the table at this point because it is so highly unusual to vanish literally without a trace, as has happened here.
Randy Kessler, defense attorney joining us out of Atlanta, they have to keep every option open. And they say and reiterate that the family is cooperating. We do know that the friend of the grandpa, the mother and father, had never met before. That can happen, right? But in regard to anybody else who may have been in that very desolate area, we don't believe that there were any roadblocks done right after this child went missing, because there's one way in and one way out. Did they make a mistake? Did they take an opportunity and not go forward with a possibility here that could have helped them?
Well, you know, hindsight's 20/20, and we don't know what the lawyer for the parents is conveying to the authorities. But the bottom line is we know where the parents are, and they're not running, they're not leaving. So we have them, so to speak, in the bag if we need to ask them questions or need to prosecute them. Right now, you've got to explore every other option and rule out everything. Wild animals is not an out-of-the-question possibility. You know, this child's going to show up somewhere. We hope the child's alive when he shows up. But if he's not, those animals could easily be the answer that everybody's looking for.
You know, that's true, but Cheryl Dorsey, when you look at wild animals and as you're doing the police investigation there, wild animals lead to blood. Wild animals, I guess a bear could swallow whole, but there could be some clothes or remnants or fibers or anything. Forensically, they're not finding anything, Cheryl.
Yeah, and you know, also you would think that if the child was grabbed either by an animal or another person, that he probably would have made a sound. I mean, we don't hear him doing anything that would have alerted the attention of the grandfather. So it just seems very strange to me that he would come up missing just in an instant, in a moment, without a trace.
That's right. That's right. And adults in every vicinity right there believing they're keeping an eye on him. Matt Zarrell, I want to go back to something that Randy Kessler just mentioned. We don't know. The parents don't have a lawyer, right?
No, they don't. They're cooperating 100%. The cops are adamant that they're doing everything that they can to find the child. And most importantly, the police are saying publicly they have not made a single conflicting statement. Everything has been very consistent. They've interviewed the family. The police say, I'm good with them, and they're good with me.
And actually, they have come out saying that on social media that people are trying to blame the parents, and law enforcement is very upset about that because they believe it's taking the sight off of the investigation, what should really be looked at. Nate Eaton, you are right there at the search site in Idaho. We do know that this little boy had a Hot Wheels truck in his pocket, so that's one thing he did have with him when he went missing. Any sight of that at all, which would be such a huge clue at this point.
Yeah, it would be a huge clue. No sight of that. No sight of his toy monkey, of his cup, of his blanket. Those are three items his parents say he always takes with him wherever he goes. Those were left behind at the campsite. No sign of any of those things. No sign of his cowboy boots, of his camouflage jacket that he was wearing, of his pajama pants. Nothing.
It looks like your average campsite. You've got a fire pit, a picnic table.
Are you by water? Yes.
Very close to the creek that we have heard so much about. In fact, the creek is just here a few yards away. Notice the terrain down to the water. It's very steep.
Our biggest concern was the creek, which was knee deep, a few feet wide.
6 guys, 2 in wetsuits, hip waders, on their hands and knees. Searched it yesterday, we're searching today.
I'm Jean Casares in for Nancy Grace. Those are the parents right there of this little boy that's gone missing. They're staying right where the searchers are looking for him. The searchers are actually in the water now, divers in the water, because dogs are hitting on the water. But they've searched the water for days now, and they're not finding this little boy at all. To Dr. Bill Mannion, forensic pathologist in Philadelphia, here's what we've learned. We've learned that from the campsite area to the lake area, the water is 4/10 of a mile. That's almost a half a mile there. How long would it take a little 2.5-year-old to get to the water?
In that terrain, it would take hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. It sounds very unlikely to me in my experience with children that wander off like this.
All right, now couple that with the fact that the parents say it was 10 minutes that they then realized that neither adult had the child. 10 minutes. Now, we've got the police talking about the distance from the campsite to the water and the terrain. Listen to the authorities.
Statistically, you know, you come back to the place last seen, which is right down there, and you kind of start over. We're using dogs a lot more right now. I believe the statistic is children 1 to 3, they're found within 4/10 of a mile. 75% are found within 4/10 of a mile of where they're last seen. And we've gone beyond that, and we'll continue.
Attorney Misty Maris in New York, I have a big inconsistency issue here because 10 minutes is what the family is saying by the time they walked to a part of the water where they went to, and they saw some minnows, and they wanted to bring them the child to see the minnows, and they then realized the child is missing. But we just heard the doctor saying that it would take hours for a little 2.5-year-old to go 4/10 of a mile. It doesn't make sense.
No, it certainly doesn't, and perhaps that's what's leading the family to say, hey, maybe this is an abduction, because that time frame is just so small. But as we know, children, you turn your back, they can run away in an instant. And here we have a case of a miscommunication between the family member and a guardian. I thought you were watching them. I thought great-grandfather was watching them. It's just really a true mystery at this point.
And a tragic, tragic mystery. Bethany Marshall, psychoanalyst, joining us from Los Angeles. You know, the family is continuing to hold on to the belief that this little boy has been abducted. And maybe he has been. Right. Maybe he's in a bus stop, a truck stop, driving on the highway with someone. That's why we show his little picture so much, so anyone can find him and identify him if they see a little boy that looks like him. But the family also says it's the only thing we have to cling onto for hope. So is this something that psychologically is allowing them to get through this?
If it was an abduction, that seems likely to me that that kind of a sex offender might be in a remote area. But are there any major thoroughfares? How would someone take a child so quickly?
In a split second, your whole world is upside down and vanished.
The parents decided to go off exploring. They went up this way, away from the campsite, while Deorr stayed here with his grandfather.
I come back up to get him, and I yelled over to Grandpa, "Where's little Deorr?" Immediately shocked. He says, he came up to you. There's not a single trace of him.
I'm Jean Casares in for Nancy Grace. It's summer. You want to go camping. You go to an area that's in the state you live in, near Idaho Falls. That's where the family is from. And you have all adults. You're watching your child, and all of a sudden they're gone. Absolutely gone. Nate Eaton, you were there. You have spoken with the family. Did they take any pictures of the child before this all happened?
As far as I know, I don't think they did. They had just arrived at the campsite that Friday afternoon, and then they set up their camp, and then the parents went off exploring, and when they came back, he was gone. So as far as I know, no recent photos of him.
You know what I bet, Nate? They found some minnows down at the water, and they wanted to bring the little boy to the water to see the minnows. That's where they probably would have taken their pictures once they got down to the water's edge. Nate, what else have you learned in talking with the parents, in being there, that we don't know because we're here and you're there?
The parents are very distraught. They are camped right outside where all of this happened. The mom, the dad, and their tent and a little campfire. They're not eating. They're having a hard time sleeping. They say they'll do anything to find their little boy, including having a lie detector test, having a DNA sample. They want people to know they are innocent, and they just want their boy back.
No question. Matt Zurel, tell me about the search, because it's at the water's edge. They're using divers. Dogs have hit there, but yet they continue to search day after day. I mean, are they changing their method of how to go into the water?
Yes, they are a little bit. So today the cops tell us that they're doing a grid search so that they can work from one side of the reservoir to the other and then move ropes and go to the next grid. And what's interesting is that cops say that they're using food coloring to help them stay within the pattern. It helps them to make sure they cover the whole area. They don't double up on a place they've already searched. Another thing that's a problem, Gene, is at the bottom of the reservoir, the foliage is very thick. So if the child was at the bottom of the reservoir, they're going to have a very hard time finding him. The cops say they're going to continue to search that area through the weekend. They'll put out the site scan sonar. They're going to know 100% through the weekend if they've got anything in the lake at all.
Matt, tell me again about the little toy that he actually had with him, the only thing that he had with him, it appears, when he wandered off or left the campsite area.
Yeah, we spoke to the grandfather, who says that Deorr had a little toy Hot Wheels truck that was in his pocket. His father's a truck driver. He really loves trucks, and he had this little toy Hot Wheels truck in his pocket. But cops haven't found it yet, and you would think, Gene, that if something happened to him, if he was grabbed, if he fell, maybe the toy would have fallen out of his pocket, but cops have not found it.
And you'd think it would be light and it might float to the top of the water. Nate Eaton, who is the grandfather's friend? Is it a male? Is it a female? I mean, what do we know about them?
We know very little. We know it is a male. He is a man, and he was there with the grandpa and the parents. Police aren't saying much about him other than he is cooperating with their investigation. We also know the grandpa. He's a little older. He has some health issues, and they don't, at this point, suspect the grandpa to have anything to do with the disappearance. As far as the friend, we're still gathering information, learning as much as we can on him.